Dr. James Carter was not used to being the center of attention, especially not on an alien spaceship. As a skilled human medic, he had worked with different species before, but nothing could prepare him for what happened that day. James had been assigned to the Alliance starship Varkara, a massive vessel housing many alien species working together. His role was simple: provide medical care and assist where needed. He expected to treat minor injuries, maybe a few serious cases, but nothing beyond that. Everything changed when Commander Xylara summoned him. Xylara was not just any alien. She was the respected leader of the ship, known for her strength, wisdom, and strict nature. She was tall, with shimmering blue skin and piercing golden eyes that seemed to see through a person's soul. The crew followed her orders without question, and she rarely interacted directly with humans. James was in the medical bay, checking supplies, when a young alien crew member approached him nervously. "Dr. James," she said in a shaky voice, "Commander Xylara requests your presence in her quarters." Immediately, James raised an eyebrow. "Me? Are you sure?" The crew member nodded quickly. "Yes," she said, "it's urgent." James felt a mix of curiosity and unease. Why would the commander want to see him? He grabbed his medical kit and followed the crew member through the long corridors of the ship. When they reached Xylara's quarters, the crew member stopped and gestured for James to enter. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a spacious but minimalist room. Xylara stood in the center, her hands clasped behind her back, looking as imposing as ever. "Dr. James," she said in her deep, commanding voice. "Thank you for coming." James nodded respectfully. "Commander Xylara, how can I assist you?" Xylara stared at him for a moment before speaking. "I need you to inspect my body." James blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "Excuse me. I require a full body inspection," she repeated firmly. "There is something unusual happening, and I trust you to find out what it is." James's mind raced. This was highly unusual. In his experience, alien commanders rarely requested personal medical inspections, especially from humans. He could feel the weight of her gaze, and the seriousness in her tone left no room for argument. "Of course, Commander," he said, trying to sound calm. "Can you tell me what symptoms you've been experiencing?" Xylara hesitated for a moment, then said, "I have noticed changes in my energy levels and strange sensations in my skin. These are not normal for my species." James nodded, taking out his medical scanner. "Let's start with a basic scan." As he began the examination, the silence in the room felt heavy. He could sense Xylara's tension, though she tried to appear calm. The scanner hummed softly, displaying data that James quickly analyzed. "There's an unusual energy fluctuation in your system," he said after a moment. "It's not something I've seen before, but it could be related to stress or an environmental factor." Xylara frowned. "It's not stress. I've dealt with much worse without any issues." James thought for a moment. "Have you been exposed to anything new recently? Foods, environments, or even people?" Xylara's eyes narrowed slightly. "No, nothing unusual. But there is something else you should know." James looked up, waiting for her to continue. "In my culture," Xylara said slowly, "allowing someone to inspect one's body is a significant act of trust. It is not done lightly." James felt a surge of responsibility. This wasn't just a medical examination. It was a deeply personal matter for her. "I understand, Commander," he said sincerely. "I'll do my best to help you." Xylara gave a small nod. "Good. I am placing my trust in you, Dr. James. Do not fail me." The words carried a weight that James couldn't ignore. He knew this was the beginning of something much bigger than a simple medical checkup. As he continued the examination, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would change everything, not just for him, but for the entire crew of the Varkara. For now, though, he focused on the task at hand, determined to uncover the mystery behind the alien commander's strange demand. Learning alien secrets. Dr. James Carter couldn't stop thinking about his strange encounter with Commander Xylara. Her demand for a body inspection was unusual, but what intrigued him more was the trust she placed in him. He knew that this was not just a simple medical checkup. It was something much deeper. The next morning, James returned to his routine in the medical bay. He checked on a few minor injuries and monitored the health of the crew. Despite the busy day, his mind kept drifting back to Xylara's words. What was the meaning behind this act of trust? Why had she chosen him? Later in the day, James was called back to Xylara's quarters. The commander greeted him with her usual calm, but there was a hint of tension in her eyes. "Dr. James," she said, "I need to share something with you." James nodded, sensing the seriousness in her voice. "I'm here to help, Commander. Whatever it is, you can trust me." Xylara took a deep breath. "In my culture, allowing someone to inspect your body is not just about trust. It is also a way of sharing our most personal secrets." James felt a chill run down his spine. Secrets? What kind of secrets? Xylara walked over to a small table and picked up a glowing crystal. She held it out to James. "This is an energy crystal," she explained. "It holds the life essence of my people. Every commander carries one. It is linked to our health and our strength." James examined the crystal carefully. It pulsed softly in his hand, emitting a faint warmth. "This is amazing," he said. "But how is it connected to your health?" Xylara nodded. "The crystal is a part of us. When it's balanced, we are strong. But if something disrupts it, we become weak or ill." James thought about the strange energy fluctuation he had detected during her examination. Could the anomaly I found be linked to this crystal? Xylara's eyes darkened. "That is what I fear. If the crystal is affected, it could mean someone is trying to harm me, or worse, the entire crew." James felt a surge of urgency. "We need to investigate this further. If someone is tampering with these crystals, it could be a serious threat." Xylara agreed. "But we must be careful. If word spreads, it could cause panic. Only a few trusted individuals know about the true nature of these crystals." James understood the need for discretion. "I'll do everything I can to help, Commander. We'll figure this out together." Xylara seemed relieved by his words. "Thank you, Dr. James. Your knowledge and skills may be the key to solving this mystery." Over the next few days, James worked closely with Xylara. They studied the crystal's energy patterns and compared them with the data from his medical scanner. The more they analyzed, the clearer it became that something, or someone, was interfering with the crystal's natural balance. One evening, while reviewing their findings, Xylara revealed more about her people's traditions. "In our society," she said, "commanders are the protectors of our people. The crystal is both a symbol of our strength and our vulnerability. Only those we trust with our lives are allowed to touch it." James felt honored by her trust. "I've never encountered anything like this before. Your people's connection to these crystals is incredible." Xylara gave a rare smile. "It is a bond that has kept us strong for generations. But now someone is trying to break that bond." James clenched his fists. "We won't let that happen. Whoever is behind this will be stopped." As they continued their work, James couldn't help but admire Xylara's strength and determination. Despite the danger, she remained calm and focused, leading her crew with unwavering resolve. But James also noticed something else, a growing bond between them. The more time they spent together, the more he felt connected to her, not just as a medic, but as a friend and ally. One night, as they reviewed the final data, Xylara looked at James with a serious expression. "Dr. James," she said, "I believe we are getting close to the truth. But the closer we get, the more dangerous this becomes." James met her gaze with determination. "I'm ready for whatever comes, Commander. We're in this together." Xylara nodded. Together. With their trust in each other stronger than ever, they prepared for the next step in their journey, uncovering the hidden threat that endangered not only Xylara, but the entire crew of the Valkyria. A hidden danger, Dr. James Carter was beginning to understand that life aboard the Valkyrie was anything but ordinary. His initial assumption of a routine medical role had been completely overturned by his involvement with Commander Solara's mysterious condition. What started as a simple body inspection had now revealed something far more dangerous. After days of studying the energy crystal, James and Solara sat together in her quarters, poring over the latest data. The anomaly James had detected wasn't going away. In fact, it seemed to be growing stronger, and the energy fluctuations were becoming more erratic. "This is not normal," James said, frowning at the glowing screen. "The energy levels should be stable, but instead, they're spiking randomly." Solara nodded, her expression serious. "I have felt it too. My strength is not what it used to be. At times, I feel a strange weakness, as if something is draining me." James leaned back in his chair, trying to piece together the clues. Could it be something in the ship? Maybe a new environmental factor affecting the crystal? Solara shook her head. "We have not changed anything. Everything is as it has always been." James thought for a moment, then asked, "Is it possible that someone could be doing this on purpose?" Solara's golden eyes narrowed. "You think someone is trying to sabotage me?" "It's a possibility," James replied carefully. "If someone wanted to weaken you or disrupt the crew, targeting the crystal would be an effective way." Solara was silent for a moment, considering his words. "If that is true, we must act quickly. But we cannot alert the crew just yet. If there is a traitor among us, we need to find them without causing panic." James agreed. "We need more information. I'll run some tests on the crystal's energy patterns. Maybe we can trace the source of the interference." Over the next few days, James worked tirelessly in the medical bay, analyzing the data. He used every tool at his disposal, comparing the energy readings from Solara's crystal with the baseline data from other crew members. One evening, while James was deep in his work, Solara entered the medical bay. She looked more tired than usual, her normally vibrant skin appearing dull. "Dr. James," she said softly, "have you found anything?" James turned to her, his face grim. "I think I have. There's a specific frequency that seems to be disrupting the crystal's energy. It's like a signal, but it's very faint." Solara's eyes narrowed. "A signal? From where?" James hesitated. "That's the part I'm still trying to figure out. It could be coming from inside the ship, or even from outside. But wherever it's coming from, it's targeting your crystal specifically." Solara's jaw tightened. "Then we must find the source immediately. If this is an attack, it could put the entire crew at risk." James nodded. "I'll need your help. If we can triangulate the signal, we might be able to locate the source." Together, they set to work. Using the ship's advanced sensors, they began scanning for the mysterious signal. Hours passed, and the tension in the room grew as they combed through the data. Finally, James spotted something. "There." He pointed to the screen. "The signal is coming from the lower decks, near the engine room." Solara's eyes flashed with determination. "We must go there now." James grabbed his medical kit, and they hurried through the corridors of the Valkyrie. The ship was quiet at this hour, with most of the crew either resting or on light duty. As they approached the engine room, the faint hum of the ship's systems was the only sound. When they reached the engine room, Solara motioned for James to stay back. She stepped forward, her hand resting on the hilt of her weapon. "Whoever is here," she called out, her voice firm, "show yourself." There was a moment of silence, then a figure emerged from the shadows. It was one of the crew members, a technician named Lauren. His eyes darted nervously between James and Solara. "Commander," Lauren stammered, "what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same," Solara replied coldly. "What are you doing in the engine room at this hour?" Lauren swallowed hard. I was checking the systems, routine maintenance." James stepped forward. "Routine maintenance doesn't include sending out strange energy signals. We know what you've been doing." Lauren's face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." Silara's eyes narrowed. Enough lies. You are under arrest for sabotage. You will tell us everything. As the guards arrived to take Lauren into custody, James and Silara exchanged a glance. They had uncovered a hidden danger, but the full extent of the threat was still unknown. Building trust. Dr. James Carter sat in the medical bay, replaying the events of the past few days in his mind. The discovery of Lauren's sabotage had shaken everyone on the Valkyria. Commander Silara had been right to be cautious, but the revelation still left many questions unanswered. Why had Lauren done it? And was he working alone? James knew one thing for sure. The crew's trust was now more important than ever. The next morning, James was summoned to the command center. Silara stood at the central console, her eyes scanning a report. She looked up as James entered. "Dr. James," she said, her tone as steady as ever. "Thank you for coming. We need to discuss what happens next." James nodded, stepping closer. "Of course, Commander. What's our next move?" Silara sighed, a rare sign of her inner turmoil. "Lauren is in custody, but he refuses to talk. He claims he was acting alone, but I'm not convinced." James frowned. "Do you think there are others involved?" Silara nodded slowly. "It's possible. Sabotage on this scale is rarely the work of one person. We must be vigilant." James felt the weight of her words. The ship was a closed environment, and any breach of trust could have devastating consequences. "What can I do to help?" Silara gave him a small, grateful smile. "You've already done much, Dr. James, but we need to ensure the crew remains united. Fear and suspicion can spread quickly. We need to build trust, not just between us, but among everyone on this ship." James understood. "I'll do my best. If the crew sees us working together, it might help ease their fears." Silara nodded. "That's exactly what I was thinking." In the days that followed, James and Silara worked closely, not just on solving the mystery of the sabotage, but also on fostering a sense of unity among the crew. They held regular meetings, sharing as much information as they could without compromising security. James also made a point to interact with the crew more personally. He visited different sections of the ship, offering medical advice and lending a listening ear. Slowly, he began to notice a change. The crew, initially wary and tense, started to relax. They appreciated his efforts, and some even began to open up to him about their concerns. One evening, after a particularly long day, James found himself in the ship's recreation area. A group of crew members invited him to join their card game. He hesitated at first, but then decided it was a good opportunity to connect. As they played, the conversation flowed naturally. The crew shared stories of their home planets, their families, and their experiences on the Valkyria. James listened intently, sharing his own stories when prompted. He found himself laughing and enjoying the camaraderie. At one point, a young alien named Zara leaned in and said, "Dr. James, we've all noticed how hard you've been working to help us. It means a lot." James smiled warmly. "I'm just doing my job, but it's nice to know it's appreciated." Zara nodded. "It is. And we trust you. You and Commander Silara are the reason we feel safe." James felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Zara. That means a lot." Later that night, as James walked back to his quarters, he thought about Zara's words. Trust was a fragile thing, but it was also powerful. He knew they still had a long way to go, but for the first time in days, he felt hopeful. The next morning, Silara summoned him again. This time, her expression was softer, more relaxed. "Dr. James," she said, "I've heard good things about your interactions with the crew." James smiled modestly. "I just tried to be there for them, Commander. They needed someone to listen." Silara nodded. "And you did well. Trust is not built overnight, but you have laid a strong foundation." James felt a sense of pride. "We make a good team, Commander." Silara's eyes softened. "Yes, we do. And we will need that unity in the days to come." James knew she was right. The threat of sabotage was still real, and they had to remain vigilant. But for now, he took comfort in knowing that they were not alone. Together, they were stronger. As he left Silara's quarters, James couldn't help but feel that they were on the brink of something greater. The challenges ahead would be tough, but with trust and unity, they could face anything. Uncovering the plot, Dr. James Carter sat in his quarters, staring at the data on his screen. The faint signal that had led them to Lauren was still active, and its presence gnawed at him. Despite Lauren's capture, James couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was yet to come. The next day, James met Commander Xilara in the command center. She was reviewing the ship's logs, looking for anything unusual. Her eyes were sharp, scanning each line with precision. "Commander," James said, stepping up beside her, "I've been thinking. If the signal is still active, then Lauren wasn't acting alone. We need to dig deeper." Xilara nodded, her expression grim. "I agree, but we must tread carefully. Whoever is behind this is still out there, watching." James leaned in, lowering his voice. "I've been analyzing the signal. It's faint, but it's consistent. I believe it's being transmitted from somewhere on the ship, but it's masked by the ship's systems." Silara's eyes narrowed. "You think someone is using our own systems to hide the signal?" "Exactly," James replied. "It's clever. They're using the ship's energy flows to disguise their transmissions, but I think I can trace it." Xilara straightened, her gaze fixed on him. "Do it, but keep it quiet. The fewer people know, the better." James nodded and returned to the medical bay. Setting up his equipment, he began a detailed scan of the ship's energy systems, carefully isolating the patterns that matched the signal. Hours passed as he worked, his mind focused entirely on the task. Finally, he found something. A small, hidden transmitter embedded within the ship's communications array. It was cleverly concealed, designed to look like part of the normal equipment. James quickly reported his findings to Xilara. She listened intently, her expression growing darker with each word. "This is serious," she said. "If someone has access to our communications, they could be sending information to an enemy." James nodded, "And receiving instructions as well. We need to disable the transmitter and find out who's behind this." Xilara called a small, trusted team together. They moved swiftly to the communications array, where James pointed out the hidden device. One of the technicians, a seasoned engineer named Rylan, carefully removed the transmitter. "This is advanced tech," he said, inspecting it. "Definitely not standard issue." Silara's jaw tightened. "Can you trace it back to its source?" Rylan nodded. "I'll need some time, but yes, I can." As Rylan worked on tracing the signal, James and Xilara gathered in the command center to discuss their next steps. The atmosphere was tense. They knew they were getting closer to the truth, but the stakes were higher than ever. A few hours later, Rylan returned with the results. "Commander, the transmitter was relaying signals to a hidden terminal in the lower decks. I've pinpointed its location." Xilara stood, her eyes blazing with determination. "Good work. We'll confront whoever is there immediately." James and Xilara, along with a small security team, made their way to the lower decks. The ship's corridors were silent, the only sound their footsteps echoing softly. As they approached the hidden terminal, Xilara signaled for the team to spread out. She stepped forward, her hand on her weapon. "Whoever is in there, come out now." There was a moment of silence. Then the door slid open. Inside, they found another crew member, a communications officer named Varric, hunched over the terminal. Varric looked up, his face pale. "Commander, I can explain." "Save it," Xilara interrupted coldly. "You've been caught red-handed. Step away from the terminal." Varric hesitated, then slowly stood, his hands raised. "You don't understand. I didn't have a choice." James frowned. "What do you mean?" Varric swallowed hard. "They have my family." They said they'd kill them if I didn't help. Silara's expression softened slightly, but her resolve remained. Who are they, Varric? Who are you working for? Varric looked down, shame written all over his face. The Zorathians. They want the Valkyra. They believe our ship holds the key to winning the war. James felt a chill run down his spine. The Zorathians were a ruthless enemy, known for their cunning and cruelty. Silara stepped closer. You should have come to me, Varric. We could have protected you and your family. Varric shook his head. I didn't know who to trust. They said they had people everywhere. James placed a hand on Silara's arm. Commander, we need to act fast. If the Zorathians are involved, this is bigger than we thought. Silara nodded, her eyes filled with determination. We'll protect this ship and its crew, no matter the cost. The final fight. The Valkyra was on high alert. After uncovering the Zorathian plot, Commander Silara knew time was running out. The enemy could strike at any moment. Dr. James Carter stood by her side in the command center, watching as the crew prepared for battle. All stations report ready, Commander, said Rylan, the chief engineer. His voice was calm, but James could see the tension in his eyes. Silara nodded. Good, stay sharp, everyone. The Zorathians are not to be underestimated. James glanced at the tactical display. Do we have any idea when they'll arrive? Silara shook her head. No, but we know they're coming, and we'll be ready. Suddenly, the ship's sensors blared to life. A red alert echoed through the corridors as the tactical officer shouted, Enemy ships approaching. Commander, 3 Zorathian warships. Silara's jaw tightened. Prepare for combat. All hands to battle stations. James felt his heart race as the ship's crew sprang into action. He wasn't a soldier, but he knew his role was just as important. He rushed to the medical bay, ready to assist the injured. The Valkyra shook as the first shots were fired. The Zorathian warships unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, but the Valkyra's shields held strong. Silara's voice came over the ship's intercom, calm but firm. All units, return fire. Focus on their lead ship. In the medical bay, James steadied himself as the ship rocked again. Crew members began to stream in, some with minor injuries, others more severe. James and his team worked quickly, treating wounds and stabilizing the injured. The battle raged on, each side trading blows. The Valkyra fought bravely, its advanced technology and well-trained crew holding their own against the Zorathian fleet. Back in the command center, Silara stood tall, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Target their engines. We need to disable their mobility. The tactical officer nodded, relaying her orders. Moments later, the Valkyra's weapons found their mark, striking the lead Zorathian ship. It shuddered under the impact, its engines flickering. They're losing power, Commander, the tactical officer reported. Silara's lips curved into a small, determined smile. Good. Press the advantage. Don't let up. The Valkyra pushed forward, its weapons blazing. The second Zorathian ship tried to flank them, but Silara anticipated the move. Bring us about. Target their weapon systems. The ship swung around, its cannons unleashing a devastating volley. The Zorathian ship's weapons went dark, its offensive capability crippled. In the medical bay, James continued his work, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. He knew the battle outside was fierce, but his focus remained on saving lives. The crew depended on him, and he wouldn't let them down. As the battle reached its climax, the third Zorathian ship launched a desperate assault. It charged the Valkyra, its weapons firing wildly. Silara's eyes narrowed. Brace for impact. All hands, prepare for emergency maneuvers. The ship shook violently as the Zorathian vessel rammed into them. The impact threw James against the wall, but he quickly regained his footing. Around him, crew members stumbled, but they too recovered swiftly, their training kicking in. Silara's voice cut through the chaos. Damage report. Minor breaches in sections 4 and 5. Commander. Shields holding at 40%, the engineering officer replied. Good, Silera said, her voice calm. Let's finish this. The Valkyra turned its weapons on the last Zorathian ship. With precision and power, they unleashed a final barrage. The enemy ship, already damaged from its reckless assault, couldn't withstand the onslaught. It exploded in a brilliant flash, debris scattering into the void. A cheer erupted through the command center. Silera allowed herself a brief smile. Well done, everyone. Stand down from red alert. Begin recovery operations. James slumped against the wall in the medical bay, exhaustion washing over him. The battle was over, but the work wasn't done. There were still injured crew members to care for, and the ship needed repairs. As the Valkyra began its journey back to friendly space, James found himself reflecting on the events of the past days. They had faced betrayal, uncovered a dangerous plot, and fought a fierce battle. But through it all, they had stood together. Later, Silera visited James in the medical bay. She found him bandaging a crew member's arm. Dr. James, she said softly, you've done more than your share today. James looked up, offering a tired smile. Just doing my part, Commander. Silera nodded, her expression warm. You've done more than that. You've been a pillar of strength for this crew. We wouldn't have made it without you. James felt a swell of pride. We all did our part, Commander. This was a team effort. Silera smiled. Indeed it was. And together, we've won this battle. As she left, James took a deep breath, the weight of the day finally lifting. The fight was over, but their journey was far from finished. And whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together. A new beginning. The Valkyra floated peacefully in the quiet of deep space. The battle was over, and the Zorathian threat had been eliminated. But Commander Silera knew that peace was always temporary in this universe. Still, for now, her crew had earned a moment of rest. The medical bay was quieter than it had been in days. Dr. James Carter walked through the room, checking on his patients. His hands were still steady, but his body was tired. The battle had taken a toll on everyone, but the crew was resilient. They had survived, and they had done so together. James stopped at the bed of a young crew member, a communications officer named Tessa. She had been injured during the final assault, but was recovering well. How are you feeling? James asked, smiling softly. Tessa looked up, her face still pale but her eyes bright. Better, thanks to you, Doctor. I didn't think I'd make it after that blast. You're strong, James replied. You've got a good team behind you. Tessa nodded. We all do. James turned to leave, but Silera entered the medical bay, her footsteps confident and purposeful. The moment she saw him, she gave him a nod of respect. Dr. James, the crew wanted to thank you for everything you've done. The captain's going to present you with a medal. James raised an eyebrow, surprised. I didn't do anything special. Silera smiled. You saved lives. That's more than enough.